is a switch, as I said, to do that. First thing we do is we scale our particles. That's to get them back to a uniform scale, which you can see up here, 100, 100, 100. Then we spawn once, and we spawn 12 particles. That has the effect of obviously resetting our particle age, and also it gives us an exact number of particles. We're deleting the parent, so we end up with 12 particles. Then we split off every 12th particle. So in other words, the first 11 particles spawn stay in this event and become a splash. Particle splashes, little blobs of water that fly through the air. And the 12th particle gets sent on to this next event here, which we'll come to in a moment. The particles which remain in this event are affected by gravity. Don't forget they've bounced off the ground collision object, so they're now flying through the air. So we need gravity to pull them back down onto the ground. You see we've got gravity and drag here. Then we've got material static rain, because we still want this rain droplet effect. We want a collision detection with the ground and the pedestal, because those are the two most likely things that they will collide with. We could put the ogre in there as well, but it would slow things down, and it's not going to add that much to our effect. And then what we do is we look for when the particles have collided with the ground or the pedestal twice. When they've done it twice, then we allow them to pass on to the next event, which you can see there's this one here where they get killed off. Because basically we don't want our water droplets bouncing and bouncing and bouncing and bouncing. A, it would look ridiculous, and B, it would mean an awful lot of water droplets in our scene. It would build up until eventually, particle flow choked up. So our 12th particle is sent off to this event, and in this event we split off every 4th particle, and this is basically just to reduce the number of splashes that we see in our scene. When I say splashes, I mean geometry splashes, which are those animated objects that I showed you earlier, which would be these objects here. These are the geo splashes, animated geometry splashes. So these are used in this event. As I said, if you want to reduce the number of these geometry splashes, you can actually go in here and change this to every 3rd particle or every 1st particle. Obviously, if you change it to every 1st particle, you're going to remove all the splashes, in which case you may as well just copy one of these delete modifiers and pop it in here, and that'll just get rid of the geometry splash altogether. But in this case, I think I went for every 4th, so in other words it just removes 25% of the geometry splashes, because I just found I had too many of them basically. You can obviously adjust that by changing the split amount value here as well. We use speed along icon arrow, and that basically just aligns the particle with the ground. We use actually, you can see we actually use a speed of 0, so that actually stops the particle dead as well. We've got a shape instance, which is the water splashes, and it's just using that group, and it'll obviously pick one of the 3 objects randomly, so you get a nice variation in your splashes. We rotate them horizontally, completely randomly, so we just rotate each mesh individually, so we have another randomization of them, which again is great for giving more of an organic look. Then we apply this material, which is a dynamic material, which is the splash material, which I told you about earlier. And then we delete each splash object when it reaches an age of 12. And that's obviously just to keep the amount of geometry in our scene down. So that makes sure that when our splashes have done their animation, we kill them off, so they don't remain in the scene, clogging up our data flow and using up lots of memory and so forth. So that's an animated splash geo. Now that actual effect is used in another place in our flow, which we'll have a look at over here. Any particles which collide with our ogre statue go into the second part of our flow, which is probably the most complex part. So the first thing we do is we have this event called vertical surface splash. And what that does is, the first thing is it actually scales our particle, so we've got a uniform scale again. Otherwise, we'd have this stretched particle effect. Then we spawn 5 particles once, we delete our parent, we have 5 particles, and this also resets the particle age. We split off every 5th particle, so in other words, when these particles collide, just one particle will produce 5 particles, 4 particles will remain in this event, and the 5th one gets sent on to this event. The 4 that remain have gravity applied, and